Hello everybody, this is GeneralJannis. Now with the arrival of Fulgrim, we now have a full set of the 4 Daemon Primarchs available to 40k. So in this video I'm looking at the showdown between them, what damage can they each do, what are their durability against other units, but also importantly, how would they fare in a 1 versus 1 battle across meeting each other on the battlefields. So with no further ado, let's get started. So today, the 9th of March 25, today, as I said, we will have a full focus on the Daemon Primarchs. Now with the arrival of Fulgrim, Slaanesh is chosen for the Emperor's Children, the newest Daemon Primarch to arrive. We now have a full set for each of the 4 Chaos Gods. So in this video I will be looking very short, briefly about their lore, the stats and abilities of the Primarchs. Then we will be looking a bit more on the Fulgrim's datasheet, and we will look at the Primarch's damage output versus the typical targets I'm typically simulating. I will give you the overall per point comparison. Their point is quite different. For example, Magnus is 465 points, Mortarion is only 300 points. And then after that, we will look at the showdown of Primarch versus Primarch and the expected damage. What do we expect they can do versus each other? So let's take a look. So looking at the lore and the history of the Daemon Primarchs, there is no brotherly love there, but they are brothers and they are sons of the emperors, very different. Let's say for the Death Guard Legion, of course, the Primarch is Mortarion and he's devoted to the Chaos God Nurgle. Mortarion, when the Primarchs were spread out by Chaos, when the Emperor had manufactured them or developed them, and Mortarion ended up in Barbaros, a very toxic world led by some nasty overlords, and that made him very durable. And he started a rebellion against these vile overlords that had the human population, let's say, under shackles. And he is a psyker, and but he dislikes psykers a lot. He spoke out in the Council of Nicaea against Magnus and to not use psykers in the Space Marine legions, and this of course Magnus and Mortarion are not the best of friends. He was very resentful towards the Emperor because the Emperor took him away from Barbaros and the rebellion. He helped him defeat the Overlord, but Mortarion never forgave him because he wanted to have this aspect. But his whole legion is all about durability and diseases and spreading Nurgle's gift and Nurgle's garden. In the Horus Heresy, they were quick. The Death Guard were quick to join the rebellion and became a traitor legion, and they were supposed to be the breachhead brigade to attack Terra, but they were trapped in space en route to Terra. Typhus, the first commander, he did Nurgle's bidding, and everything was captured, and they befell a terrible plague on the legion. And then finally Mortarion submitted to Nurgle, and then this is of course my Death Guard is my first army, and Mortarion is my personal Primarch, let's say. If we then look at the Thousand Sons, we have Magnus the Red. He's of course the preferred guy of the god Tzeentch. He's a very strong psyker. And in his battle brothers, his legion had some genetic flaw and some mutations, and therefore the name Thousand Sons, because there were not so many. So Magnus was always interested in the arcane and interested in gaining knowledge, and also wanted to cure his legions, his brothers. And when the psychic was banned in the Council of Nicaea, he withdrew with his sons basically, and he was really bitter and towards the others. But during the Horus Heresy, when he had a vision of the rebellion, he tried to warn the Emperor, but that destroyed the psychic defenses the Emperor was building in Terra, and that was a terrible thing. And the Emperor, he was really angry, even if Magnus did nothing wrong. But the Emperor sent the Spey Wolves to destroy the planet of Magnus Prospero. And then in the battle with Leman Russ, his brother Tzeentch, and let's say Magnus, he took the whole city and moved into the warp and in the planet of the Sorcerer, where he lives with his sons. Then of course Ahriman, he cast a rubric, and all the Marines turned to ashes. And so this is a terrible fate for the Thousand Sons, but Magnus always out for a very strong psyker and always out to gain more knowledge. If we go to the World Eaters and another plagued, let's say very troubled Primarch, Angron, of course, the chaos god of Khorne, the god of blood and skulls. He was a gladiator and implanted by the butcher's nail in his brain that only gives pleasure when they are fighting and war. That was a punishment because he didn't want to fight against a fellow gladiator. He also led a rebellion in his planet, but then the emperor came and took him away, and abandoning his fellow gladiators, and Angron never forgave the emperor for that, so he was really quick to join the rebellion, spearheaded many attacks, very brutal, the World Eaters, and he had a very big fight against his brother Guilliman of the Ultramarines, and he reached demonhood there, where Lorgar of the Word Bearers, the Primarch there, he made some incantations, and then the Angron became a Demon Primarch. And then finally the Emperor's Children, with the Primarch Fulgrim, the god of Slaanesh, the god of excess. The Emperor's Children always were about seeking perfection and seeking to win impressive victories and excess and things like that. And in the world of Lair, a serpent type alien, they found Fulgrim found a demonic blade. Unbeknownst to him, he didn't know it was a demon residing inside, but it started to corrupt Fulgrim. And in the Horus Heresy, he joined the rebellion. He fought and killed his brother Ferrus Manus through this demonic corruption. But then, realizing what he'd done, the greater demon took over and possessed his body, but managed now to regain the control, and he's dedicated to Slaanesh and leading the Emperor's Children to greater perfection. Now moving away from the lore and starting to look at some of the data specs and the sheets and the abilities of the Primarchs, just briefly here because I have been doing analysis of them before. So Mortarion at 300 points, you can see his stat line here. He's the most tough of the Primarch. He has a toughness 12. Otherwise, all the Primarchs are basically have a 2+ save, a 4+ invulnerable save, and 16 wounds, as you can see here. Mortarion is also the slowest one, with only, let's say, a 10-inch move, which is quite fast for Death Guard anyway. He has a 5+ feel no pain ability, so it makes him even more durable, and on top of the toughness 12. He has an aura ability that every Death Guard unit can ignore modifiers to the characteristics. So for example, if something has -1 or to hit or weapon skill or -1 to damage, they can ignore that, and Mortarion can ignore that. He has 3 abilities to choose from. Reroll once to wound aura. He can give greater contagion range, which is the army rule of the Death Guard, and also give cover in an area. But he has to select one of those 3. And of course, the Death Guard army rule is that they have a -1 toughness contagion range. Looking at Magnus the Red, he's 465 points, as I said, the most expensive of the Primarchs. He has the aura to give +1 to hit and +1 to wound. He can choose -1 to incoming damage, +2-inch moves, etc. And in the army rule, there is a lot of shenanigans that the Thousand Suns can do with the Cabal points. For 2 points, for example, he could reroll a failed save, which could be quite strong against some very huge attacks. There is a lot of utility in the codex, so that if another sorcerer can see a unit, then Magnus can shoot through that, and he has some nice shooting weapons, as I will show you a bit later. And then Angron from the 435 points. He has with the army rule of the World Eaters, he could be resurrected with full wounds on a 666. So that's really strong, even if it takes quite some effort to put down a Demon Primarch, and he could be returning to the game. He can choose between reroll all to hit aura, +1 attack aura in melee, or +1 to charge aura. And there are in the army rule, not only can he be resurrected, but the whole World Eaters could get, for example, 6+ feel no pain. There can be other buffs in melee, etc. And of course, Angron is really the melee beast. And now the newest Daemon Primarch, Fulgrim, his full datasheet here. We can see he's at 385 points, that's printed in the codex. He has a 16-inch move. This is the fastest Daemon Primarch. And with the army rule of the Thrill Seekers, the faction rule, let's say, he can advance and charge. And that would be a very big threat range. So 16-inch plus advancing, let's say 3-4 inches. You're already at 20 inches maybe, and then with you could make, let's say, a 7-8 inch charge. You have a very big threat range, 27-28 inch with Fulgrim. He has an ability of demonic poisons, and this could be quite scary, or like psychological, at least it could be scary, because he can select a unit that he has after in the shooting phase and in the fight phase, after it has made its attacks. You can select one enemy unit that was hit by those attacks, and then that until the end of the battle, this these units will be poisoned and rolling. In the command phases, they have to, each player's command phase actually roll dice, and on a 4+, they will be receiving D3 mortal wounds, and that if he doesn't kill straight out something, he can make them suffer through mortal wounds. So that's quite strong. And like all the other Daemon Primarchs, he can select one of 3 abilities at the start. He has it on the start of the opponent's command phase. And he can select of these 3. He can be at -1 to be hit. He can get the fight first ability, which is quite strong. If versus a melee army, then Fulgrim can fight first. Or he can restrict enemies from falling back. And you select on the opponent's, let's say, command phase, as I said, and therefore he has this defensive and utility buffs. But he doesn't buff basically the other Emperor's Children. He just buffs himself. And now looking at especially Fulgrim's weapons and the other Primarchs' damage output versus the variety of targets I'm typically simulating. So you can see here in melee, Fulgrim has the demonic blades. He can have a strike profile and a sweep profile, and they both have sustained hits. And you can see that for anything tougher, let's say that the Terminators and up, it's better to use the strike profile. If you are attacking Marines, equivalent like Intercessors, or Horde type infantry like Guardsmen and things like that, it's better to go with the sweep attack. You can see the green fields here, the damage where you should select which profile. He also has the Serpentine Tail, which gives him extra attacks, and you can see it adds a little bit more damage, but the main damage of course comes from the demonic blades. And he could be able to do a lot of wounds, especially on, for example, on tanks and things like that. He also has a lash that can shoot at 12-inch range with sustained hits, and you can see there the damage across the table. So, for example, shooting, you could be killing three Intercessors or 1 Terminator. And then when you charge, for example, the total melee damage you can see below in the final line of the purple lines here, and you see that shooting and making melee damage, you can take out quite a lot of enemy units and make a lot of wounds also on vehicles. But if we compare him, for example, to Angron's melee damage, where he gives himself, including the reroll to hit, so here we can see that Angron is the best melee damage dealer here. He does crazy amount of damage, especially versus tanks and other vehicles. He could be basically killing a big knight in melee here. If we look at Magnus, he has the shooting, he has 2 ability shooting, and he can also shoot at longer range, and with 1000 Sun shenanigans he could be shooting and be hidden and things like that. But Magnus, he can do quite a lot of damage in his shooting. He can also do something in melee, but not as strong as the other Primarchs. And finally, when we come to Mortarion, he is near the bottom of the damage output. He has some shooting, he has some melee, but he's not a melee beat stick that he previously was. He has fewer attacks, and he has more utility as buffing the rest of the army. And here I'm just giving you a graphical representation of the previous table. The total damage that the Primarch does, this is not point corrected. if they both shoot, charge, and do the melee damage. So we see, for example, versus infantry, Fulgrim has quite good damage output. On top of this, there will be some poison damage not included in these stats. We see here Angron and Magnus is good versus Terminators. And we see Mortarion as the green line nearly at the bottom. When we move to vehicles, then we can see Angron's weapons really stand out against the vehicles. And again, Mortarion is on the weaker end of the damage output. So what we've seen previously, there was the not point corrected, the actual expected damage versus the typical targets. Here I'm doing the per point comparison. So this is damage per 100 points of the Primarch, and here is the damage across all the targets that you saw previously, so both vehicles and infantry. And we see I've indicated with green highlights who has the highest damage output. So for example, if we see Angron, when he gives himself the reroll to hit, he has the 3.7 wounds per 100 points of himself versus melee. He doesn't have any shooting. And if we see at the shooting at longer range, of course, Magnus is leading the table here. And if we go to Mortarion, you can see his damage output not as good per 100 points. He's 300 points only, but still the others do more damage per point. But where he's ahead is in the durability. You see the durability index here. I'm comparing a index 100 versus heavy weapons would be a Rhino or a Predator tank, and you can see that that Mortarion has the highest durability, while Angron has the least durability per point, and Fulgrim is somewhere in the middle, both damage wise. But if we add shoot plus melee, point corrected, it's very equal between Mortarion, Angron, and Fulgrim. And as I said previously, I haven't included the effect of the poison ability on top. That also has a psychological effect. And if you look at the damage per point, it doesn't seem very strong for Magnus here, but he has loads of utility and shenanigans up his sleeves. And durability, as I said, Mortarion offers the best value for the points. So now that the Primarchs have done their damage and dealt with other units, now it's the time to face off against each other. And I've selected some calculation rules here, so I've typically included relevant army rules but not specific detachment rules and any stratagems that would complicate everything quite a lot. So for Magnus the Red, I just said for the 1-on-1 he has the -1 damage ability activated. For Angron, I assume that he has the 6+ feel no pain because it only requires a double from the army rule. He gives himself also the reroll all to hit, so hitting on 2s, rerolling, that's quite okay. And Fulgrim is assumed to have -1 to be hit activated. He could have the fight first, but in this comparison I just wanted to see what is the damage that they can do in one turn of fighting. In Mortarion, he has of course the -1 toughness contagion that will affect his counterparts, and he has the reroll once to wound activated. So in this table I'm showing you on the rows is basically the attacker. We have Magnus, Angron, Fulgrim, and Mortarion, and they are and on the columns we have the target. So if we can also see, for example, so if we see Magnus the Red attacking himself, another Magnus, the mirror image, he will be doing 2.8 wounds in the shooting phase and 4.9 in melee, a total 7.7 wounds. So not near enough to kill an opponent Magnus, let's say. If he attacks Angron, he does more damage because Angron has the 6+ feel no pain here, but he's not -1 damage in melee. And here we can see that he can do 10 wounds on Angron. Fulgrim with -1 to be hit, 9.3 wounds, and Mortarion with toughness 12 and the 5+ feel no pain, Magnus can only do 8 wounds, so half killing, let's say, expected on Mortarion. But of course, if you are unlucky or lucky with your dice, the results can change, but this is basically the average value as you expect. If we look at Angron attacking at his fellow Primarchs, he does more damage, so 11, 12, 13 wounds against the other. Mortarion 10 wounds, so he's starting to be degraded. And Fulgrim a bit more total damage than Magnus here for most targets. And finally Mortarion as well, quite similar damage output as the others. And in the next page I will show you a graphical presentation. Sometimes a table is good and sometimes a chart can do more. So here we see the Primarch versus Primarch chart here again. So on the bottom we see who's the attacker. So for example, when Magnus the Red is doing the attack against himself, as we saw, it was around 8 wounds. Against Angron it was around 10 wounds. Against Fulgrim a little bit lower, and Mortarion with a 5+ feel no pain is around the 8 wound mark. And we can see basically by just looking at the graph, Angron does more damage to his brothers, but he also takes more damage from his brothers, let's say. And Mortarion, the green bars are lower than the others, so basically Mortarion has the best durability with his 5+ feel no pain and a bit more toughness. Mortarion's damage, he can counteract that Magnus is -1 damage or Fulgrim is -1 to be hit. Mortarion is basically that, don't care about that. But we see, for example, Magnus and Fulgrim that do quite similar damage output. And in no matchup we can see it is expected that a Primarch alone can kill his brother in one turn. So it's a bit like, have you softened the target with some of the other units? Will you use rerolls? Are you lucky with your dice? If the defending Primarch misses a lot of save rolls, that could really turn the tide. But yeah, expected not to be able to kill one in one turn. But Angron, best damage dealer, and Mortarion, best durable. So reaching to the summary and final thoughts, interesting times in 40k now. We have all the 4 Daemon Primarchs available. Magnus, the most expensive but very high utility in the Thousand Suns army with Cabal shenanigans and buffs to the other units, etc. Angron, as we saw, very hard hitting in melee, can be resurrected. He could be really painful to face. Of course, pain is what is driving him. Fulgrim, he doesn't buff his army, but he's fast and quite threatening figure with poison. 16 inches advance and charge is not easy to be taken seriously. And Mortarion, he's the lowest point cost. He's the most durable and more of a buffing unit for Death Guard. But he's a bit lacking in the damage output, but he also is a bit more durable. So this concludes this showdown of the Primarchs. Let me know what you think in the comments. I really enjoy reading your comments, and if you have some suggestions or questions for other videos and things like that. And thanks for everybody for liking and subscribing on the channel, really helping it to grow. So with these words, GeneralJannis signing out. Stay safe out there, and bye-bye.